Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Achates Philanthropy Live online. We are just setting up our live stream at the moment. It's lovely to see so many of you already joined on the stream. I hope you're all well on this lovely and sunny afternoon where I am anyway. I hope it is where you are. Caroline McCormick, our director, is going to join me shortly as we just wait for more of you to join the session this afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you this afternoon, Caroline?
I'm all right. I'm enjoying the sunshine, although, yeah, it's strange to be trapped inside. How about you?
Yeah, same. It would be much nicer to be out in the sunshine than it is looking at it through the window, but we are at home, we are safe, and that's the main thing at the moment, I think.
And we're going to be joined by lots of our friends. I saw that we have a slightly smaller group joining us today because obviously so many people have unfortunately had to be furloughed, but still it looked like we got around 50 people joining us from across the country, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it was a real shame actually to see how many bounce backs we had from the mailer for this session. With so many people being furloughed, I think it shows where the sector is actually, and it's sad, but I think the best we can hope is that
jobs, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, exactly, that it will mean that the sector will be able to bounce back once we're all actually allowed out and once theatres, we're able to open up again and we can all become operational.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say a big hello to all the people that we've been talking to over recent weeks. It's been lovely to talk to lots of old friends and to make new ones through the pro bono sessions that we've been doing. I have to say that I've learned a lot in this really rapidly changing landscape, and I've been nothing but impressed by the hard work, the dedication of everybody. And I know that those of you that aren't furloughed are working so hard to keep everything going and strong for when we do carry on with the next part of our lives. And yeah, thank you for all that you're doing out there. It's really wonderful work.
I completely agree. I think one of the things I've really enjoyed seeing over the last few weeks, I think we're all taking small moments of joy where we can. Absolutely. One of the things I've really enjoyed is seeing people's responses, looking at the projects that are going ahead, looking at people's digital responses. And I think for me, really particularly those organisations that are really focused on their audiences and what their audiences and participants need and how they can deliver those things to them at the moment, because I think we're all aware that this is a time when those responses are more needed. As a sector, we need to be visible, we need to be present, and we need to be serving our audiences more than ever.
Absolutely. And of course, today we're going to focus on future of corporate support of the sector, but obviously we're thinking about things in the round more broadly. And for me, I think the arts and the cultural sector is really dignifying itself and distinguishing itself by the impressive work and thoughtful work that's being done right now. And it's going to be good to hear a bit more about that in the session today. Kerry-Ann, we've got 3 special guests with us today, haven't we?
Yes, we absolutely do. So I think let's kick off the session. I think, Caroline, I've just realised you and I haven't introduced ourselves properly.
Should we do it again?
I think let's start the session proper as we are. So I am Kerry-Ann Isles. I'm Executive Director of Achates Philanthropy. And joining us today are...
I'm Caroline McCormick. I'm the Director of Achates Philanthropy.
We also have Gwen Oakton of the Lowry Theatre. I'm just seeing if she's there and if she can give us...
Hi, Gwen.
Gwen, give us a hello, Gwen, so everyone can see you. Hi, Gwen. And we've got Liana Telvey of the Old Vic. She should be popping up on your screen.
Hi, everyone.
Shortly. Hi, Liana.
Lovely to be with us, both of you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
We also have our final guest of the day is Paul Owens of BOP. BOP are one of the key partners for the Achates Philanthropy Prize, and Paul will be joining us later on in the session to give us the Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget this afternoon, which is our new regular feature as part of our live online stream. So we'll come to later. Paul, can you say hi and give us a wave?
Hello, lovely to be here.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Thank you. So just before we dip into the session proper, a small amount of housekeeping. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Our previous session has had nearly 250 views on YouTube so far. As many of you know, we're keeping these videos up online on our YouTube channel as long as we possibly can. So do share them, do rewatch them if they're useful to you. These sessions are here as a way for us to support the sector, to support you all through this very difficult time. So we're going to continue to deliver these every 2 weeks. So if you have something that you would like to talk about in a session, something you would like to hear, do drop us a line. We'd love to hear what you want us to talk about. Also, we are going to be on the chat in the YouTube stream today. So do say hello. You're very quiet this afternoon. Do say hello. We'd love to hear your questions. Essentially, these sessions are about what's useful to the sector. So if you've got something you'd like to ask us, something that comes up through the session, do ask us a question on the YouTube chat and we'll feed those questions in to our panelists later on in the session. Without further ado, I think I'm going to hand over to Caroline, who's going to start the session with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Kerry-Ann, and thanks again to Liana, to Gwen and to Paul for joining us. I'd like to start by sending you all our very good wishes at this difficult time, and that we hope very much that you're all doing well. As I've already mentioned, we have a slightly smaller group with us this afternoon, simply because of the furloughing of staff that's had to take place. But we're delighted to have you with us. And we know that the sessions have been getting hundreds of views on YouTube after they've been broadcast as well. So we look forward to sharing this with you later. I should just note that, of course, the views that are expressed are those of the individuals speaking and not of their organisations necessarily, and equally that things are accurate at the point of broadcast but may be out of date later. I'm going to focus today on the future of corporate support of the cultural sector. However, I want to start, if I may, with a snapshot of the wider landscape and then perhaps a brief analysis before going to our guests and to discuss some of the issues with them. Then we'll take questions and then perhaps we'll talk about what's next for the sector. And finally, as Kerry-Ann's mentioned, we'll have Paul's golden nugget. So first of all, big welcome, as Kerry-Ann's already said, to Gwen from the Lowry. Wonderful to have you with us, Gwen. Liana, a good friend of ours from the Old Vic, who are our regular hosts of the Achates Live, and we look forward to resuming them in person with you in due course, Liana. And Paul Owens, co-founder and director of BOP Consulting, and definitely the best wise person to give a golden nugget for us today. So I'm going to move on to talking through a little bit of an overview of the sector. As you all know as fundraisers, the cultural sector raises around 545 million a year from private income sources. So by that, I mean trusts, individuals and corporate sources annually. I don't mean statutory funding, but those other sources. This represents less than 2% of all support for charities in the UK. We're a tiny part of charitable giving. And of this 545 million, 60% of it consistently for more than 10 years has gone to the 50 biggest brands, the majority of which are, of course, located in London. Research, and by research, I mean research led by BOP Consulting in association with Achates Philanthropy, has proved that the potential success of a cultural organisation in fundraising is related to the following hierarchy of factors: size of organisation, location, then art form, then whether the organisation has its own venue, and then whether it has access to data. So very simply speaking, being a visual art or an opera organisation with a big venue in central London is probably going to be easier to fundraise for than a poetry organisation with no venue and no data in the north of England. So we start to see the kind of pattern that can emerge. So what does COVID-19 mean in the light of this understanding of the sector and how fundraising influences us all? Well, I think it's clear that the impact of COVID-19 on the resilience of the sector will be both dramatic and far-reaching. It's really going to accelerate the changes and the risks that organisations were already facing. And I can see you nodding already there, Gwen. It's really bringing home many of the issues we're already facing. However, the extent of the impact is not informed by the hierarchy of factors that we normally see influencing fundraising and which I've outlined above. It's instead informed by the overall balance of income of an organisation and the timing of its activity in relation to the crisis. So it's not surprising, given that private income sources on average represent just 15% of income for cultural sector organisations, with 33% being governmental sources and 52% being earned income, that perhaps where you earn your income is going to be the most significant factor at this time. This leads us to a situation where in the short term, some of the most resilient cultural organisations will appear to be those with the greatest reliance on government sources. However, I would suggest that a more complex picture is emerging in the medium to long term, and not least because governmental sources are expected to decline further. Major trusts and foundations make up 38% of that 545 million. And as we heard a couple of weeks ago from the John Ellerman Foundation, many of them have indicated that they expect to dig into their endowments to maintain their current levels of giving, which is fantastic news for us in the sector. However, I think it's also very clear that the very high levels of competition are going to be even greater than before, with a keen emphasis on theory of change-driven impact and rigorous evaluation. Individual giving is the largest of the private investment income sources at 43% and growing. However, the impact of COVID-19 on individual giving is as yet unknown as the longer-term economic picture continues to emerge. However, it is clear that as household income declines, charitable giving is also likely to do so. It will be vital that cultural organisations demonstrate their impact and value as charities and as part of society at this time and going forwards. So, the impact on corporate support is expected to be dramatic, as this income source was already in considerable decline. In 2012, we had £144 million worth of corporate support for the sector. By 2018, this had dropped to 98 million, so nearly a third decrease in that time period, and had reduced to 18% of our private income. It's perhaps likely to be the most negatively impacted, with the arts having to make a robust case for support alongside many other charities going forward. So, with those rather tough statistics in mind, I'm going to turn to our two guests, Liana and Gwen. We thought very carefully about who to invite to join us this week. We usually invite small to medium-sized organisations in particular to share their views because they perhaps are the ones that get less of a platform. But we thought this session we'd focus on larger organisations with a particularly strong corporate base. I'm going to be asking our participants questions, and there'll be a chance for you to do so as well after we've addressed a few initial points. So welcome to Gwen and to Liana. Hi Gwen, hi Liana.
Hello, it's lovely to be here, thank you.
Hi everyone. Yeah, lovely to be here too. Nice to feel together in some way, even if it's digitally.
Lovely to have you both with us, really appreciated. So I'm going to ask you both the same questions, but in turn, if I may. So Gwen, if you'd like to go first, could you tell us a bit about your role at the Lowry and the sort of scale and proportion of voluntary income that you're raising, and what proportion of that's corporate support?
Yeah, of course. So very quickly, for anyone who doesn't know the Lowry, I'm just aware that some people might not. We're a large cross-arts organisation. We're in Salford, Greater Manchester. On a normal day when I'm in my office, I can look out the window and see the BBC, ITV. We're in the heart of Media City, UK, so it's an exciting place to be. It wasn't always thus, but it's changed dramatically over the last 10 years. We have 3 theatres, the largest of which can take just under 2,000 people. And we have the largest collection of public collection of artworks by L.S. Lowry in our galleries. So we're a busy beast. We only get 5% of our funding from public sources, and we raise the rest mostly through ticket income, but also from conferencing and events and from fundraising. The fundraising pot is quite small, I guess, proportionately, but we also raise funds for special projects and for capital work that needs to happen in our building. The last one was £5 million in 2015. I'm the director of development, but I'm the co-director. So I'm in a job share with a wonderful human being called Rhiannon McKay-Smith. We're both part-time, and we have a team of 4, and we raise income from the places that you just mentioned, Caroline, corporates, trusts and foundations, individuals, pretty much actually equally between the 3. Right. And in terms of our corporate support, it is strong, and we're proud of that. And we have been noticing it's getting more and more difficult, but we're bucking the trend a bit, I think, in certain ways. We have a really strong corporate membership that's been going for a long time. It's quite traditional, I guess, in that it's a ticket package, and they also get access to a members area that we have in the building. We have some strong, creative, quite interesting sponsorships, particularly in the last kind of 3 years. We have a CSR scheme where people can join, and very much about social impact, and we're noticing that's growing and becoming much more important to businesses. And then we also have fundraising events that are very much geared at the corporate sector that we run across the year. And then just finally, increasingly recently, we've been going for corporate foundations as well. I'm pitching to be charity of the year, particularly with professional services firms. So we work with all of those different companies across all those different platforms in very different ways.
You're a busy team by the sounds of it, Gwen. Thank you.
We are.
Diana, tell us a bit about the Old Vic and about your role and about the income raised and how corporate sits within that, would you?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the Senior Corporate Development Manager at the Old Vic Theatre. The Old Vic Theatre is over 200 years old, and it's based in Waterloo. We aim to have about 6 to 8 shows a year, and we are not funded by the government. So our fundraising is absolutely essential to the work that we do, and especially during times like this, we're kind of really feeling that. In terms of income, as a fundraising team, we raise about £4 million a year, and 1.4 of which is from corporate cash. So that's made up of corporate membership, sponsorship, corporate training, and our principal partner, RBC, as well as our preview partner, PwC. And the rest, we also do £200,000 worth of gift in kind and budget relieving income, as well as £40,000 for sponsorship for our annual gala, which unfortunately was postponed this year. So that's a little bit of an overview. Our corporate membership ranges from £7,500 to £30,000. And we kind of offer sponsorship of various programs, including social mobility initiatives as well, as Gwen mentioned, and everything in between, really. That's kind of
fantastic.
us.
Thanks, Liana. That's a really helpful overview. So everybody now both knows about your organisations and your roles within them and how you're doing with your fundraising. Can I ask you both, firstly, do you recognise the pre-COVID-19 trends in giving that I referred to at the beginning? Gwen?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the way that we've been working with companies in the corporate sector has had to change quite a lot in the last few years. There's definitely a greater need to demonstrate impact. There's definitely, I think, a kind of multifaceted way of working with them as well. So even if you've got companies who just want to look at client entertaining, that's not enough anymore. They also want to be ticking all those boxes. And we're also finding that they want more blood for their money.
Absolutely.
And we're having to be really careful with that. It could lead you down a garden path of basically it not being worth it. So definitely recognised it from our point of view, yeah.
Liana, sounds like it's ringing some bells with you as well.
Yeah, I think from our side, we've kind of been bracing ourselves for Brexit and those implications. So I think we've been almost crisis planning long before this, but not for the right one. Well, who knows? But we've also been quite aware of anti-bribery laws as well that have come into place over the past few years. I don't know if that's affected you as well, Gwen. So I think as a corporate team, we've kind of been thinking about the changes to the sector, and as you mentioned, kind of being a little bit more fulsome and kind of building CSR and volunteering into the classic corporate entertaining as well, and trying to tick all those boxes as opposed to just being one thing to our partners. So that
and I think it's really worthwhile mentioning those anti-bribery law changes and the reduced spend per head, and into how that's affected people's entertaining budgets, etc., really significantly. And I think that's something I'd like to pick up on later, if I may. Can I ask you both, you're obviously doing brilliant work and very successful fundraisers. What would you say is particularly unique, distinctive about your offer, and why have you been successful with corporates so far? Gwen?
I think we've had to think outside the box and be really creative. So we don't work with any of our, say, if I take sponsorship, for instance, we don't work with any of our sponsors in the same way as each other. We feel like it's often led by the sector a bit. So we work with a big manufacturing company who wouldn't be interested at all about brand or about client entertaining. They want to give back to the community. But they're fantastic because they don't just look at it in terms of funding a certain scheme that they run that we have through our learning and engagement department. They also have a placement with one of our young people in their building. They come and do CV workshops with them. We try and make it as integrated as we can with each different person that we work with. On the flip side, we work with a holiday company who basically just want to get to our audiences and just want our data. And GDPR made that really difficult. So there's been a number of hurdles, I think, in the last few years that have made this quite difficult. But we just try and go into every single new partnership in a really collaborative way, find out what they want, and then also don't think of it just in terms of income to us. So what else, how else can it meet our objectives? So when you look at brands and things, we try and have a look at how we can reach their audiences to get more ticket sales, for instance. So making it as collaborative as possible, I guess.
So a keen understanding of each other's purpose, and then really trying to link to the artistic as well, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Diana, what about the Old Vic?
So from our side, as I mentioned, we're over 200 years old. So I think we've definitely been able to use that long-standing heritage. And it's something we're definitely using now as we appeal to supporters to kind of save that British institution. We also, as I mentioned, we don't receive government subsidy. So we use that in our case for support quite a lot. We'll always say that their gifts really are transformational to us. So I think when they can feel that impact, it makes quite a big difference to our fundraising. And then finally, I'd say, again, quite similar to Gwen, we are really keen on making our corporate membership as flexible as possible. So although I mentioned the 7.5 to the 30, pretty much none of our members will go in for the offering that we've highlighted. And we're really keen to kind of, it's just a starting board. We'll really want to make it work for them and make it as unique to what they want as possible. As long as we aim to make about 70 to 80% profit from those partnerships, so we're still remaining profitable with what we're doing. That's kind of how we manage our corporate memberships, and I think that there's some success in that flexibility and that personalization for their membership package.
Nice. So heritage, charity, impact, and being bespoke. Profit-making framework, absolutely, great. So could you both now, with your very successful contacts, and bravo to you both for what you're doing, tell us a bit about how COVID-19 has affected you so far from a corporate perspective? Gwen?
Yeah, I mean, just before this happened, we just secured an airline to sponsor us. So obviously that went straight away. We've had a number of sponsors who have already said they're unable to sponsor us for the next 12 months at least. You'd expect that. We haven't had renewals on corporate memberships, and it's all to be expected. And I think what we tried to do very quickly is reach out and have personal conversations with every single one of them. in the interests of just trying to retain as much as we could at that point. So we did lose a few sponsorships, like I mentioned, the airline that were new and that hadn't, been contracted and we hadn't received money for yet. Yeah. But we've managed to keep hold of, I think, majority of the others for now. Who knows when this goes on for longer, what happens. I think it's about us trying to be as flexible as possible with the more benefits-driven companies.
Okay, I'm going to come back to your strategies in a second, Gwen. Now, tell me a bit more about, from the Old Vic's perspective, how have things been?
So we've had some corporate members that have been unable to renew, and some sticky situations where contracts were signed, but then actually looking at financial positions, they were unable to support us. So we've had to kind of be as empathetic as possible with the view of being able to bring them back on when they're ready and being as kind and understanding as we can at this moment. We've actually had to put on pause about £100,000 worth of new business conversations, which we were hoping to bridge the gap across kind of our fundraising. As you may, Caroline, we embarked on an ambitious capital campaign this year, which has been great timing as well. So we had hoped to kind of bridge the gap from some individual fundraising, which moved into capital money. So that new business income was really essential to our work. But as we're all seeing, a lot of industries are affected.
Yeah. So you're also, like Gwen, being very flexible and very nimble. Are there any actual sort of practical strategies that you're both trying to put in place, extending membership lengths, these kind of tools? Gwen, what are you doing?
Yeah, so we've done a bit of we looked at our corporate membership first, because that felt like the most structured way that we work with companies. So we've done an extension of 6 months to their benefits. So that membership scheme was basically all about ticket usage and the corporate members lounge. So that felt like an easy way of looking at that in a very tangible way. And then we've looked at all the different sponsors and supporters and done it bespoke for each one of them. So wherever possible, we've tried to tell them that the money might be, in a very similar way actually that we've done to trusts and foundations, will be diverted during this time. Yeah. So easier with those companies that support the more charitable areas of our business rather than the more kind of brand and create and client entertaining bits. But there are ways that we are engaging with some of those vulnerable young people that they fund work that goes towards in these times, be it remote or however else we're doing that. So we're trying to just keep in contact with them about that and tell them.
And do you think you're possibly, Gwen, educating some of them a bit about your work in doing this as well?
Definitely. I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with one of our sponsors, because we were talking about where it left some of those young people I mentioned before, who are incredibly isolated anyway in this context. They are so vulnerable. We had a big conversation about it, and even though that was a company that has a charity committee that we pitched to for support, he said at the end of the call he had not grasped just how desperate those things were. So there's positives in this too, I think.
That's the point I'd like to come back to. Liana, how about from the Old Vic side? How are your strategies going?
So as a kind of matter of our first instinct was to go and look out for early renewals. So we went out to everyone who was due to renew before the end of the financial year, which is for us the 31st of August. And we kind of sent through that appeal, and any benefits that they've lost out on would then be rolled over to their new contract, so they'd be able to make the most of it. And we're also now going out to corporate members who are due to renew before the end of December with a similar plea. And that's kind of with the hope that we can get secure income in now and be able to plan as a business. We hope that we don't use that money and it remains in our next financial year, but it's good to know that we have it if we need it. And then aside from that, I think, which you mentioned earlier, a lot of people are being furloughed and we're all making big changes as an organisation. So one of the things we've done is incorporated that narrative of the financial precautions we're taking, and as a business, how many of us are being furloughed. And we've actually taken a 20% pay cut across the board until October, and reduced to a 4-day working week. And we want to use that, we've used that narrative to kind of demonstrate this is where we are before we go out for any questions. It's kind of showing the need there. And then finally, we've been looking at how to celebrate supporters who do come through at this time. So
Right.
we're looking at creating a designated page that is kind of, we're working on a fun name at the moment, so stay tuned, but kind of how to celebrate those people who really like had our back when we needed them, and using it as a good PR story, because in a way, this is an amazing time for a corporate to be pulling a cultural institution out of a really dark time. And there's a great opportunity for positive brand alignment and for them to be able to show a really great impact. So we're trying to kind of spin it towards that angle, which...
Well, yeah, really impressive. And to both of you, absolutely, and bravo to both of you for what you're doing. It sounds like it's tremendous. And let's hope that those strategies really bite and have a good effect for you both. I'd like to just change direction slightly and say, you both look far too young, but what do you both think we can learn from the 2008 crash, which, whilst in no way a direct analogy, is perhaps the nearest one any of us can draw on? We did see a reasonable recovery. I gave some figures between 2012 and 2018 earlier, but we did see some recovery from 2008. Does that give you hope for the next stage, Gwen?
Yeah, I think so. I think we saw better retention levels, didn't we, rather than perhaps new business. And I think that that will be what we see this time. I think it's about also sensitively looking at those sectors that are going to be okay.
Yeah.
During this time. So dare I say it, there will be sectors that will thrive through COVID. And it's about identifying them, doing all your kind of normal research, trying to do some peer review, and if there's any ways into those sectors, and then just carefully knowing when there might be opportunities to approach those kinds of companies. And then equally on the flip side, knowing the ones that will be really struggling and building that into your stewardship plans with those companies too, because I know that Liana will say the same. You know, we sell not just a membership package or a sponsorship, it's about being part of a family. I know that sounds really cheesy, but I think we all really think that that is how it feels to support an arts organisation. So that kind of looking after of your supporters is so important when times are hard. And I'm sure that that was the same then, even though this feels so different. The general mood and the emotion around it will be the same.
I think that sense of community is really lovely, and I know it's something the Old Vic very much has as well. Liana, how are you tackling that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've been also bracing for a similar post-2008 feeling and how that's going to affect. I think we will be feeling the effects of COVID-19 for years to come now. But as Gwen said, it's about identifying the people who are benefiting during this time, and also positioning ourselves as not a nice to have and not a luxury, which maybe is something that we do as corporate fundraisers quite a lot. We're that benefit driven side. We're not necessarily the philanthropic side. We're a little bit more kind of like what they can get. And if we can turn it into, we're quite an essential service for staff well-being, for clients to feel valued after a really testing time, then hopefully we can kind of turn around our positioning in organizations as their partner who will help them through, their team as our team, as Gwen also said. So hopefully we can kind of keep relevant, and we won't feel this for too long.
I think that's a really fantastic point, and it harks back to one Gwen made earlier, which is really about, do we think that corporates will move to a more philanthropic relationship in the next period with the cultural sector, perhaps less of a commercially driven sponsorship branding package? Do we think that's a likely trend that's going to come in? And if so, is that an opportunity for us? Gwen?
Yeah, I think that had started happening already from a Lowry point of view. I think we don't really have any supporters now, corporate supporters that are kind of just in it for tickets and a show and a good time. They want that too, but they also want to know they're doing something good. And at the Lowry, we have 300 volunteers. So when you walk in the door, you're greeted by one of our amazing volunteers. And they're all these amazing people. Lots of them are from Salford. They want to give back, and they greet our supporters like their family, and they know their names, and you know, sometimes they give them a hug. That feels like a long time ago that we all hugged each other. But I think I definitely think that that will continue to grow, and the philanthropic thing will become really important, because people need the arts more than ever to heal coming out of crisis. And I think that our corporate supporters will really see that.
Absolutely. And Liana, I know that you very much have a family at the Old Vic. Is that going to change the way you go about corporate support?
I think we kind of we know what each partner wants to get out of the partnership, and they always do celebrate the positive impact they make on keeping our doors open. But I think there will be more emphasis on the well-being and healing force of the arts. And also, as we see potential financial crisis in the UK, there will be more importance on the social mobility and our CSR. So we will absolutely be kind of building it all together even more so, and demonstrating the impact of their support is not only keeping the doors open, it's keeping our schools, school projects going, it's keeping everything. So I do think that the narrative will become even more CSR focused.
Well, for me, there's a real message of hope in what you're both saying, and it shows the creativity of you both as fundraisers and the quality of your institutions, I think, as well, in that there are different ways of telling our story and different elements to it, and that there are many aspects of it that I think we would like to bring to the fore and to share with more audiences. And the great depth of the work there, we know, is something to be celebrated. So I think whilst we're obviously facing extremely difficult times, that gives me a real message of optimism. I've got some thoughts about where this might go next as a sector, but before we do that, Kerrian, have we got some questions from the chat? I can see we've got some questions because I can see the chat. So maybe I'll just, if Kerrian's not going to appear, maybe I'll just pick one or two out myself. So I can see that Rebecca Kendall, who is one of our associates and a brilliant corporate fundraiser, has got a question here for us, which is that cash is always king, but this is a good time to ask for pro bono. What do you both feel about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, we've noticed that happening more and more even before this.
Yeah.
And we've had to be quite careful with it, because obviously it can be quite time consuming. You need to make sure that it's a genuine benefit to your organisation, something that you need anyway, even if it could feel like a luxury. But no, I completely agree. And actually, we've been contacted this week by someone who wants to talk to us about the thing I mentioned earlier about the brands that will be doing really well within this situation. He works at a market research agency, and we've been talking to him about trying to get him to be a corporate member, actually.
Right.
But he's been telling us that obviously he works with some of the biggest brands in the world. They do their consumer research for them, and so he wants to talk to us about the kind of brands we might be able to go to, and also about consumer confidence. So not just about fundraising, I guess, about some of the work they're doing, about when people will be happy going back to sporting events and theatre events, and some surveys they're doing more broadly, which would be really helpful for the Lowry generally. So yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a really good time to explore that.
And it sounds like a great way of bringing some new corporates into the sector. Liana, what do you feel about pro bono or in kind?
I think pro bono is like hugely important. I would say at the moment legal advice is essential, especially employability. I'm sure a lot of your organisations have needed that help. So if you can get that through a time partnership, that's brilliant and will really save a lot for the organisation. I think with pro bono partnerships, it's really important to find the balance of how what your definition of value is,
yeah.
And make sure that both parties are really clear on what that is before, and you're able to deliver the right value to them, and they kind of know your expectations as well. We have a lot of amazing pro bono partners, and we've built that value into contracts so that it's clear from the get-go and we know what we're expecting, and they do so in return as well.
From working with Bot Consulting on the evaluation of ACE Catalyst and then ACE Catalyst Evolve, we've worked with over 500 arts organisations across the country over the last 6 years. And I have to say, for many of those small to medium-sized organisations, pro bono is often the only way in, and sometimes the only way. So it's interesting how that's moving. Kerry-Ann, I think you can hear us now. Are you back with us? No, never mind. I shall keep going. Another question. I'd like to ask about the tension between offering cultural content free and widely and keeping some exclusively for partners and for cultivation of prospects. How do you both feel about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a tricky one, isn't it? So we kind of had a conversation about this last week about comms and about what we're talking to partners and sponsors and supporters about in comparison to what we're just putting out to the public. We've launched a thing called Love Lowry, which is daily content on a blog, and it's behind the scenes and it's performance. It might be how to do an LS Lowry artwork class with your kids at home. And the conversation was exactly that. Is there anything else that we can keep, especially for supporters? And we thought about what we normally do. So we might give tickets out to Salford residents, for instance, and create special evenings for those guys. But then for our supporters, we might do a technical masterclass with the sound desk or the light desk, or we might take them and go on stage after the show. So we're trying to create that content as well and follow that structure that we would normally do in the building, but digitally.
Yeah.
And it might be that we get one of our performers to do a kind of Q&A on Zoom, and then we send that out to our patrons. But I think it's going to be tricky to get enough content to fulfill all those things. And maybe the way around it actually is more about the social impact stuff.
And telling
and case.
Yeah, and looking at your content in a broader way. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, yeah.
How about you, Liana?
So we're taking some time to really develop what our content plan looks like, and kind of initially, this initial phase has very much been firefighting. So now we're sitting back and trying to think what we can do in a way that's still unique to the Old Vic. And in terms of that kind of tension between supporters receiving something unique and also the public, we're really aware of that, because we know that our supporters aren't necessarily getting anything back beyond the positive messages and our stewardship. So I think, quite similar to Gwen, we'd love to do some Q&As and get creatives to maybe all on a Zoom or something like that, and then share the kind of more general content to the rest of the public. And we also are trying to kind of spotlight our education work as well, because right now it's a really good time that kids are home from school, parents need some help. So we've got a network online about some resources that they can be using to make sure that we're not just pausing everything. And so, yeah, quite similar to Gwen, it's about the CSR kind of conversations right now, and we're building on our content. Because we're not in a rush right now. It looks like we're here for a while. So we're really keen to get it right and give our supporters what they deserve as well.
One of the things I want to compliment both of you in both your organisations about is a very personal storytelling style that you've both undertaken, which I think has been really powerful and good practice. And well done to you both on that. Kerry-Ann, I'm hoping you're there. Do we have any more questions?
Me too. I hope I'm here this time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm getting a response. Thank you. Sorry, I had a few technical difficulties at my end. So we have another question coming from our very own Director of Development, Kane Moore. He asks, what do you do about sponsorship for large-scale events, such as festivals or anything that you're looking at headline sponsorship for? So can we take that one to Gwen first, please?
Oh, that's so difficult, isn't it? Especially if it's been sold in as mass exposure to lots of people in a field or wherever that might be. I spoke to a friend last week who works on a big festival that's just been postponed. And we had this conversation actually. And what they were looking at was a way of still delivering parts of the festival, even if that's kind of past highlights. they're a music festival, past highlights, with some kind of interesting content around what we were just saying before, Q&As and backstage footage that no one had ever seen before, as well as looking ahead at the new dates for next year. And the sponsor that was due to headline the festival was sponsoring that content on the basis that they would get lots of people seeing it, perhaps more than would buy tickets for the festival itself. So I thought that was really interesting and creative. I don't know about the amounts and if it looks completely different to what it would have looked like if they'd headlined the festival. But it was one example, I think, of a way around that, because that's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah. It sounds like a great creative response, and some of the big organisations that we work with that have those kinds of sponsorship partners have already been looking at building through their individual giving and giving that depth of social impact work as well. And I think it's going to end up being a mix, isn't it, where people end up. What about you, Liana?
So I think the probably most relevant example for us is our annual gala that was due to be in June, actually. It's crazy how soon that would have been. So we did secure our headline partner, and we essentially are postponing that. But I think kind of a message of keeping the headline sponsor engaged is everyone is craving this experience, and when we get there, there's going to be such like positivity and like great brand association of like being able to all be together and enjoy the arts and to kind of be in that environment. So I think I would just work with that partner to kind of secure that on the back of this build up of brighter times ahead, and how they can have that voice in the brighter times ahead. And also some sponsors may be getting more kind of digital reach than usual. For example, we're looking at how we can get our Voices Off sponsor to be spotlighted online a little bit more, and to celebrate that in a way that beyond a panel event in our theatre, they don't usually have the same amount of reach. So I guess thinking about how we can enhance our reach a little bit further and celebrate the positive times when they do come.
That's brilliant, and I'm already looking forward to a fantastic party at the Old Vic. Can't wait.
Me too.
Karen, do we have any more? We've got time for one more question if we have one.
We do. Well, actually, we've got an interesting response through from Shubak around this same question about what you do about these big headline sponsorship type things. They are saying that it's really impacting the planning of their festival for next year.
Yeah, sure.
Deadlines have been extended, proposals reevaluated, but they're expecting that they haven't seen the most of that impact yet. They're expecting to see it most keenly in 6 months' time. And I think that's absolutely, it chimes with the conversations we've been having internally at Achates Philanthropy about where things are in the immediate challenges, which obviously there are some key obstacles that we all have to overcome.
Absolutely.
But I think we're all really keenly aware that there's going to be impact ongoingly over the next 6 months, year, 2 years. It's really challenging to know what the longer term picture is going to look like, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been talking, as you say, Kerry-Ann, about 3 waves of impact. So there's the initial sort of 6 months, how you get through this, how you furlough staff and manage cash flow. Then, of course, according to how people's income base is composed, how you get through stage 2, when you've probably drawn a lot on your trusts and foundations and your individuals and corporates may have dropped down, how you're going to keep some kind of level of income flowing in that second phase is, I think, a really important one. And then beyond that, how we start to rebuild. Absolutely. So before we turn to Paul and his golden nugget for today, I just have a few thoughts on what next for the sector. So corporate support of the arts, we've talked about, has already declined by 1/3 since 2012. And I'm really interested to know what you think the Arts Council, Creative Industries Federation, all the different advocacy bodies might be doing about this. We've talked about how funding will probably become more social impact orientated and how the stories that we tell might need to reflect that. We might need to think about across the sector more standardised output measures linked to theories of change that we could use to underpin organisational programme development and support cross-sector evaluation to demonstrate our intrinsic and instrumental value. I'm personally a great advocate of the fact that I think there's going to need to be greater transparency in all public funding, because the competition is going to be so great. So that's going to be, for me, a key factor, which I think we're going to be looking at going forwards. And perhaps training grants for organisations who are recruiting fundraising staff to build skills and expertise in the sector, which we know is very much in demand because of the poor record of investment that's happened. So a few thoughts and perhaps provocations for future sessions there. I just want to, before we go to Paul, just say thank you both to our very special guests, to Gwen and to Liana, for both opening up and sharing the challenges and opportunities and frankly great work that you're both doing at this time. Thank you to both of you. And Kerry-Ann, golden nugget.
Thank you so much, Caroline. So I'm going to briefly introduce Paul to give us the golden nugget this afternoon. So this is Paul Owens of BOP. Excuse me, I was about to call you Paul Owens of Paul Owens. I do apologise. So Paul Owens of BOP, who is one of the key partners for the Achates Philanthropy Prize, and he is giving us the Achates Philanthropy Golden Nugget this afternoon. Over to you, Paul.
It's been fantastic listening to Gwen and Liana talking about what they're doing in a very sort of granular, sort of detailed way. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we had a sort of Gwen and Liana operating sort of equal passion, dedication, and focus across the whole of the cultural ecosystem? Wouldn't that be fantastic to have that level of energy and expertise and just drive? Because as Caroline says, you know, it's not a level playing field. And I think what this crisis is going to do is it's going to make potentially that field even less level. So I think it's hugely important that the cultural sector comes together, I think, initially through data and transparency, in terms of sharing data and working together to make the arguments for culture more generally. And I think, as everyone's saying, particularly for the social purpose of culture and the way we talk about it with our clients, which is the really beautiful, fascinating way in which cultural and social purpose support each other in imaginative cultural organizations. I think it's going to be really important in the future that there's a new level of collaboration across the cultural sector. And the place to start, I think, that's doable is with data. And on that basis, I would just really encourage everybody, you're probably all doing it already, to make sure that you are getting the data about the impact of the current situation on your organization out there. Fill in every single survey you can and just make sure that you are telling that story. And I think that, so for example, everybody should be filling in the Creative Industries Federation online survey. If you go to the Nesta website, they've got a long list of surveys all the different industry organizations are doing. Get your data about your situation out there into the public realm, so that when we start thinking about once we get beyond the emergency relief stage and we start thinking about what we call at BOP the recovery and the renewal stage, and God knows we do need quite a lot of renewal, that cultural organizations are in the habit of externalizing data about their impact to the wider world, to their funders, to all their stakeholders. And that becomes the norm. Transparency, data sharing, and working together as a sector and ecosystem to attract investment.
Absolutely, Paul, I completely agree. I think I know that I've certainly said similar, in not quite the same words, but very similar to some of the organisations that we work with. You can be doing some wonderful work, but if you aren't sharing the impact of that, it's really hard to see, for others to see where the value of that work is. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Paul.
And I think we really welcome the idea that the sector needs to come together as an ecosystem at this time. for us joining with you on these Achates live chats has been a source of sort of strength and positivity for us, and we hope it is for you, and we need to maintain that going forward, absolutely. So thank you, Paul, that's really wonderful words of advice there.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So it just remains to say thank you so much to everyone today. First of all, thank you so much, Caroline, for your input and your words of wisdom as ever. Thank you to Gwen, thank you to Liana, and thank you to Paul. The session next time will be on the 5th of May. We will be joined by Andrew Shepherd from Theatre 503, who will be talking to us about I knew I was going to stumble on that word, entrepreneurialism in the arts. I struggle with that word at the best of times. So he will be talking to us about that. I'm not going to try and say it again. I'm sure it will be a very engaging and exciting session. You will receive some information about that later. We'd love to hear your feedback on this session. Do drop us a line at the info@achatesphilanthropy.com address with your ideas for future sessions as well. Essentially, these sessions are here to respond to your needs and what you'd like to see. So do please tell us if you have something that is a burning issue within your organisation or other conversations you've been having within the wider sector. We'd love to hear your opinions and what you'd like to hear us chatting about. So I think all that remains to be said is goodbye from me. Goodbye from Caroline. Can you just say goodbye?
Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from Gwen.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for having us.
And from Liana.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a huge pleasure to chat to you all as well. So thank you.
And finally from Paul.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe and well.
Great. And on behalf of all of us here at Achates Philanthropy, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time for our next Achates live session. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.